Good morning, everyone. It's been a slightly different comment for me because I was very much inspired by the subtitle of the conference itself, which deals with politics and memory. So I really am going to be taking my comments on Dr. Joseph's paper from the perspective of Black Power's influence on public memory. While we are here engaging the history and meaning of the Black Power movement, a concurrent session on race, memory, and reconciliation is taking place right across the way. It bottoms on a paradoxically short and yet incredibly complex question: who owns the past? The answer to which conventional wisdom would suggest should only be left to those with the intestinal fortitude to go where angels fear to tread. One of the papers on that panel is Professor Larry Griffin's Race, Memory, and Historical Responsibility. What do Southerners do with the difficult past? However, as Professor Joseph demonstrates in his comprehensive survey of literature, Southerners aren't the only ones who have to deal with the difficult past. We, after all, are talking about American apartheid and the various methods by which African American women and men and others similarly situated sought to challenge it. One of these was the Black Power movement, but as Dr. Joseph rightfully assesses, it remains largely untheorized, especially not surprisingly in the realm of public history. But where do people get their public history? Shortly after the release of the movie Panther in 1995, filmmaker Mario Van Peebles and his father talked about their attempts to shop the script of the film. The Van Peebles, Mario claims, encountered one studio executive early on who claimed to be in love with the idea of making a mainstream film movie about the BPP, but with one important request. Sheepishly raising the issue with the pair, the executive wondered if it were not possible to make one of the lead Panthers white, so that the target audience could identify. When Van Peebles explained that there were no white Panthers as such, he quotes the executive as saying they could create a Berkeley student who could teach the Panthers to stand up for themselves and to believe in themselves. He could turn them on to all that revolutionary literature they read because he's white, but because he's white, he'd be forced to stay in the background to politically guide them. Deciding to see just how far this line of discussion might go, Van Peebles then suggested to the producer helpfully, so the white character is sort of a coach, and the Panthers would be like a black militant basketball team, battling the forces of oppression. To which, according to Van Peebles, the executive enthusiastically responded, exactly. The executive explained, regardless of what historical truth was, you're talking about the most feared black militant group in American history, period. Most suburban white people thought the Panthers wanted to take what we had. We thought they hated us. There's simply no way to do this film about a group of armed, supposedly anti-white revolutionaries without the film itself being perceived as anti-white, unless there's a white star on the poster. In many ways, this is a fitting way to begin to explore some of the issues raised by Dr. Joseph in his engaging talk and how they relate to the question of historical memory. In the wake of the civil rights and Black Power movements, white Southerners in particular, but Americans in general, were forced to confront and continue to confront the myriad economic, social, and political changes occasioned by the challenge not only to a Southern, but American apartheid. White Southerners were not the only Americans struggling with these changes, so eloquently chronicled by Jason Sokol in his book, There Goes My Everything, White Southerners in the Age of Civil Rights. African Americans, and as the papers at this conference illustrate, other diverse groups, contested second-class citizenship, were also adjusting to life in post-war America. And, as Professor Joseph illustrates, their interpretation of the American dream did not always mirror the aspirations of the mainstream civil rights movement, but in battling, even overthrowing, the local, national, and international problems they saw is intimately tied to American racism, capitalism, as an agent of oppression. This dialogue is coming, of course, in the wake of the election of the nation's first African-American president, leading some to declare a victory of a different stripe in the celebration of what has been called post-racial America. Even as Obama's win is being hailed as a testament to racial progress, many remain skeptical. Professor Joseph's groundbreaking work on Black Power and insistence that this is a victory the civil rights and Black Power movement share underscores this point. As the philosopher Paul Ricoeur cautions, testimony constitutes the fundamental transitional structure between memory and history. The three ought never to be confused. And yet, as we well know, this is often the case. An irate caller to an NPR program on the Black Panthers on which I was a guest bellied this point, countering my efforts to explain the Panthers' social programs, with the oft-repeated retort of those who live through and seek primacy for their experience. I remember. The same words historian David McCullough used in his 1994 introduction to the PBS documentary Malcolm X Make It Plain to describe the fear white New Yorkers had of Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam early in the 1960s. As journalist Peter Goldman recalled in the same documentary, we weren't accustomed to being told that we were devils and that we were oppressors up here in our wonderful northern cities. He was speaking for a silent mass of black people and sang it out on the devil's own airwaves, and that was an act of war. The aftershocks of that war continue, albeit in a new arena, in the search to construct a usable past, one that speaks to future generations about the importance of that historical moment. This can be a difficult process, especially in the wake of painful chapters in history. See the experience of post-Franco Spain or post-apartheid South Africa. Selective memory as opposed to history has been the rule, not the exception. For example, the historian David Blight, in his prize-winning book, Race, Reunion, and the Civil War, offers a useful account of a much earlier period in U.S. history, the Civil War Reconstruction, and how it came to be understood by successive generations of Americans. In making peace with the Civil War, Blight finds the people of the late 19th century constructed a master narrative of the war itself as a struggle between two well-intentioned, if flawed, positions. Notwithstanding defeat on the battlefield, white Southerners nevertheless managed to claim a larger victory over how the war would be remembered. The fruit of their effort was the emergence and general acceptance of the myth of the lost cause. That view then filtered into the Historical Academy.